Yeah, my name is Jim Halbeisen, and this is my opinion. On today's podcast, we have a guest, our sales manager, Chris Kohls, and as Chris gets out in the field working with guys, he's constantly getting questions, about the product, how to use the product, the program. And so today's podcast, we're going to explore those questions and see if we can shed a little light on some of the things that Chris is hearing out in the field. So, Chris, whatever you want to talk about, fire away.
Good morning. Well, Jim, Grower's Mineral Solution uses food-grade, tech-grade raw materials and natural materials with a special manufacturing process that puts it in ingredients in a solution, not suspension, along with being 95% available to plants based on university studies. Mm-hmm. The definition of an organic fertilizer is naturally provided material that can be added to soil or plants to provide nutrients and sustain growth. Why isn't Grower's Mineral considered organic?
We've addressed this situation for a very long time when the organic certification came into existence. And we approached the powers to be on, getting growers certified organic. And our experience is that there are certain things that the organic industry is opposed to using. One in particular is urea, and urea is part of our product. We think it's a very important part of the product. And again, the fact that the product is registered as a feed supplement, we felt would make it very advantageous in the organic industry. But our approach to the industry and talking with them, they just have certain things that they have declined to allow. And so we've always run into a very severe roadblock at that point. Again, it's something that we've tried to deal with, and their industry has the final say. So we're basically following their protocol and working with those individuals. We've tried different approaches, trace element approach, and they have basically said the fact that we are using a urea product in the growers does not allow us to be certified as an organic material.
Thank you. So not going to be organic, but really an organic product.
Yeah. Well, again, we feel that we're using technical grade ingredients. And what that basically means is that they're lowering or using very low heavy metal materials. We are a high phosphorus material. Phosphorus naturally occurs in the Earth's crust with heavy metals such as cadmium, lead, iron, arsenic, and we're trying to use ingredients where those materials have been lowered to very, very low levels. They're used in different human products. And the reason we do that because we don't want to offend the biological life in the soil. The predicate of the growers program is to allow the symbiotic microbes in the soil to function to their maximum, and we do not want to introduce anything into the system that would be negative to the biology in the soil. So that's why we have used these technical grade, food grade ingredients. So again, that part of the equation we think is very important. And we thought that would be, very helpful working in that industry. But again, it's something that has not been able to overcome the regulation that they impose.
Makes sense. Another question I run into out there in the thing is we can be used on any plants, but most plants have different nutritional needs at
Correct.
Various stages in their growth cycles, grains, nuts, trees, whatever.
Right.
How can we be approved and effective for all those plants and trees? How can that be?
We think the ratio between the elements is really the very big key to the grower's product. And see, the issue again when you look at it, if the product, for example, if it's sprayed onto a plant, everybody feels that the plant needs to use all the elements that are present in the product. And that's not necessarily true. You may only have one element that is really causing the stress within the plant. And so the plant will utilize what it needs of that element, and the rest of it, it will translocate into the root zone and then eventually push that out into the root zone where the microbes get a hold of it. And see, that's where the phosphorus comes into the whole program or the usage of the product, because phosphorus translocates very quickly through the plant. And using technical grade phosphorus, it allows it to happen very uniformly. So the plant will use what it needs, and then the rest of it, it will basically put into the root zone for the biological life to use. And once it's in the biological life, the synergy between the microbes and the plant, when the plant needs another element and calls for it, the microbes will be able to supply that for them. So you have no way of really knowing what the problem is with the plant unless it expresses it through some visual symptom. But again, once it shows a visual symptom, the damage has already been done, or there's been a lack of reproductive growth. So what we're trying to do is to keep the plant in balance the whole time, so that it has access to the elements it needs, and then it can pick and choose what it actually needs through the symbiosis with the microbes that are in the soil. And see, we've talked a little bit about this. We will have a podcast where we talk about rhizophagy and the work that's being done by the botany biologists at the major universities. James White at Rutgers is really in the lead on this, and trying to work through the microbes that are associated with the plant to try to feed the plant. We feel that way we can get proper volumes into the plant without using excess volumes. And then again, we're basically taking away the need to try to analyze the plant or figure out where the plant is in deficit. You know, when you do different tissue tests or the water solubility tissue tests, this is a snapshot in time. And see, that will change very significantly as the environment changes. So trying to make that prediction is very difficult. Our idea is to try to keep the plant out of stress and supply all the elements, the major elements that are needed for growth that are in the product, and then let the plant pick and choose. And what it doesn't use, what you apply, is going to go into the root zone with the microbes, and then they will feed that back to the plant to try to keep the plant out of stress, because they're in constant communication. That's pretty well been established in the scientific community.
That really makes a lot of sense, because when I was just recently up in Canada, I went to that sophisticated, research lab, greenhouse research lab, and the director there went on and on about the lighting and how difficult that is to replicate the sun's light.
Right.
The spectrum, I guess, is very complex, and man has not even close to duplicating that.
No, that's right.
And other things I see out in the field is trying to chemically feed the plants. And just how you explained what growers is actually doing there is we're relying more on nature versus man trying to grow that plant. So we're really feeding the plant what it needs immediately, and what it doesn't need, it goes to the microbes, which will eventually feed the plant as nature intended it.
The research that White is doing and the people that are working on rhizophagy are basically saying they feel that this is where nutrient management is going to have to rest. In other words, we've got to look at that biological life that associates with the plant and then feed them so that they have the minerals that the plant is looking for. And then the microbes in the plant talk back and forth. They've pretty well, through volatile organic gases, they've pretty well proven that there is a communication network there that when the plant is in need, it will talk to the microbes and they will supply, the minerals that the plant is looking for. And see, this is how, according to White, this is how plants have evolved over a period of time. When they came out of the seas, as the earth was, taking form, they were used to being exposed to minerals in the water all the time. Well, then when they came up on land, they didn't have that exposure all the time. So they had to develop a mechanism to help feed that plant. And they did that through the biological life in the soil. And see, that synergy is really the key to nutrient management. See, at this point, we're throwing all these minerals out there trying to feed the crop, but the environment can work against us. For example, here in Ohio, there was a lot of nitrogen applied to corn, in pre-merge herbicides. And then we ended up with 4, 5, 6, some places had 14 inches of rain. So the solubility of that, or even with the nitrogen, you're having volatilization occur from, the lack of air with the water. So you're losing a tremendous amount of that mineral. And see, our idea is to try to stabilize that in the biological life and get them to feed that back to the crop. The biggest problem is getting the biological life very active so that it can do this and supply it in the volume that the plant is looking for and the timing that the plant is looking for. That's part of the growers program. We feel that getting the oxygen into the profile lets or allows the microbes that do the best job of feeding the crop or have the best synergy with the crop to function to their maximum. Now, maybe once in a while they aren't quite fulfilling that need and a little bit of supplementation might be necessary. But what White is saying that is we improve that synergy between the microbes and get the volume of microbes correct, that needed addition is not going to be as large as what we're seeing today. And again, I think farmers just have to think about it. You're selling energy, you're selling sugar, a chemical that furnishes energy to another animal or to a microbe, and that's the bulk of what you're selling. And there are minerals in your finished product, but their amount is very, very small compared to the sugar volume that's in there. Even the plant itself is 96% carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. So the amount of mineral that you need to create success, that could be reduced pretty significantly in some cases.
Interesting. Well, high calcium lime is very, very important and critical in our growers program. Mm-hmm. And we were recently at a trade show and actually down there with Mike Bolshier, district manager, and Marty Whitsett, another district manager, and we had an Ohio State graduate stop by our booth.
Sure.
So we started talking calcium with him. And, asked him a simple question. If I had an 8.4 pH and I put 10 tons of high calcium lime on my per acre, what would happen? And his face just went crazy. It's like, oh, my God, that would be a disaster is what he said. And I said, well, actually, it's not, because our district manager up in North Dakota has that very example and applies that quantity pretty much as a standard application rate.
Correct.
Now, my question to you is, isn't calcium carbonated alkaline?
Yeah.
And how can that bring down the pH?
Yes. That's a very good question. We hear that a lot. We viewed the limestone application as a pH adjuster. Calcium carbonate is alkaline by a very, very small amount. If you have pure calcium carbonate soluble in water, your pH will be in that 6.9 to 7.1 range. Then see, the limestone that farmers are using is not pure calcium carbonate. Some of them have magnesium carbonate in there or dolomitic lime. And see, the ranges of the calcium and the magnesium determine whether it is a calcitic or it is a dolomitic lime. And see, when you look at calcium and magnesium individually in the chemistry lab, they're in the same periodic group. They act very much the same way. But when you put them in the soil, they hydrate differently. And see, that's where the big key is at. we are not looking at limestone as a pH adjuster. It will adjust pH, but that's not the goal that we have. What we are trying to do is put calcium on so that will flocculate the soil and encourage porosity in the soil or air movement in the soil. And see, when you get it to certain levels, that flocculation will occur so that you'll get the air movement. Now, if your soil to begin with is low in pH, the calcium with its slight alkalinity will elevate that pH. However, when you have the reverse, where the soil is already very alkaline or on the alkaline side, calcium does not chemically change the alkalinity or the pH of the soil. It does it through the biological life. When you actually put the calcium on and create airspace so that the biological life breathes better, that biological life will start to convert ammonia nitrogen in the soil to nitrate nitrogen. And as part of that process, they evolve hydrogen. That's in the chemical process. And see, that's what's happening in North Dakota. When they start out at a pH 8.2, 8.3, and their soil life is not functioning correctly, if they put the calcium on and get the soil to oxidize or breathe so that those microbes can work correctly, they'll take the nitrogen that's in the soil and convert it to a nitrate. And as it does that, it basically creates an acid in that process. If you look at it chemically, the ammonium is converted over to nitrate, and that basically is releasing hydrogen, which is giving you acid in the soil. So you're not chemically controlling the soil. And see, that's been the biggest problem for us as a company, is trying to talk to farmers about affecting that biological life with the calcium. And the establishment has basically looked at it strictly as a pH adjuster. And there's no doubt that a normal pH or a pH in the 6.8 to 8.2 range is where microbes function the best. However, when you're out of that range, when you put the calcium on, it can do either. It can elevate pH or it can reduce pH depending on what the soil microbes are basically doing. The chemical term is amphoteric. Calcium can act in either direction. It's one of the few elements that can actually do that. So again, I think the biggest challenge to farmers is to think about your soil biologically and not think about it strictly from the chemistry standpoint. There is chemistry going on in the soil, but it is basically dominated by the biological. And that's the thing that we're striving to do with the calcium, is to get the proper symbiotic microbes, to get them to function to their maximum. And one of the key elements there is oxygen. See, I think that's where tillage has always been part of farming for many, many, many years, to try to get oxygen in the soil to get those symbiotic microbes to function correctly. And actually, when we get into less tilled situations or no-tilled situations, that's an issue. Trying to get that air back into heavier, tighter clay soils, we feel calcium is really the solution to that issue and can help someone in a no-till situation very, very readily. So the farmer has to get back to thinking about the soil biologically. And if you think about it, your grandfather or your great-grandfather, what were these guys doing? They were growing a crop of corn, maybe a couple years in a row. It went to alfalfa for 3 or 4 years, plowed that down. They use a nurse crop in some cases, oats or some kind of like a wheat grass to establish the alfalfa. Then you would plow that down, and then you would come back with your regular crop. And see, again, what you did is you built that biological life in the soil. And see, we're saying the usage of something like a forage or alfalfa has gone down significantly because we're not using horses to transport. Not everybody's feeding cattle. So again, we have to do things that mimic that particular situation. And our grandfathers didn't spend a lot of money. That the addition of fertilizer came in the late 30s into World War II. And then after World War II, many farmers left the farm or they quit using rotational agriculture and basically created a whole different situation that had been carried for, many years up to that point. So the biological aspect, soil health, whatever you want to call it, we feel that calcium is a big key to that.
That's letting nature do the heavy lifting is really what we're all about.
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. Well, another interesting subject that's always in debate out in the field is water. Okay, when I first started here, water's simple, H2O. How simpler can it be? It's clear, you drink it. But we found out that's not exactly the case, or I've found that out. There's TDS, total dissolved solids, in the water, which can cause problems, both with the plant and with application using growers. My question to you is, my brother works for a spring company too, spring water company, and he's always touting, and their company's promoting the minerals. They have a TDS of around 500 or 600, and they promote that as positive for human consumption. That, hey, look at these minerals we're getting into you at no cost. Just drink our water. Right. And, I've seen that several situations. In California, I ran into some lava water that had almost 870 TDS in it. Tasted awful, but they were truly promoting it as beneficial to your body. Correct. But that's not necessarily the case, is it?
Well, the water issue has always been something that growers we've had to deal with. The product, when we use technical grade phosphorus to make the product, it makes it so very reactive. And see, the minerals in water are usually calcium, magnesium, some manganese, a little sulfur can be part of the water complex. And see, when guys were applying it, either spraying or in furrow or 2x2, they would use water with it to give them a little more volume. And see that those minerals, or the TDS you're referring to, will react with the growers. And see, in a spraying situation, right away you were plugging nozzles or plugging screens, basically, which interfered with the application, and the farmer was mad right away. But our issue was it was imbalancing the grower's product, because you were tying up some of that phosphorus with the calcium or the magnesium or the manganese that was in the water. So we've dealt with that for many years. We've gone to spraying growers straight. We also, the fastest way, and my dad figured out in the 60s, was to use rainwater. See, when you look at the water cycle, and most of you guys and ladies have dealt with that in your junior high science, that the water on the earth, as it evaporates into the atmosphere, you've actually gone through a distillation process and have created just the water molecule itself, H2O. And then when that falls to the earth and passes through the earth's crust, you start to pick up these minerals. And so when people are pulling it out of wells, or even shallow aquifers, ponds, where the water comes in through the soil, you're picking up some of this TDS. And see, the issue with the TDS and the growers is we're getting chemical interaction to imbalance the growers, plus we're causing some physical problems. And see, the problem with TDS is if you aspirate water and you look at it, it's clear, but it's in perfect solution in there. And that can vary quite significantly. And the even in the animal world, we've been told by water chemists that that mineral that these people are saying will go into your system and work, they find that to be kind of inhibitory, because the water that goes into your cell tissue has to be just water. So that mineral has to be removed before the cell will accept that water. And that creates a need for energy to do that separation. And we've seen livestock herds that have struggled with high TDS water in their productivity. Even some types of iron bacteria can be detrimental to the digestive system of animals. So again, the complexity of water is a very big issue for us as far as application is concerned, but farmers need to look at it, particularly in livestock, as far as what their animals are drinking. The other issue, too, with the dissolved solids in water is how they affect other chemicals that you put in there. Some of the water treatment companies have told me, water is a chemical. And when you add another chemical to it, there's going to be some kind of interaction between the two. And see, a lot of farmers, what we're using, harder water, higher TDS water, and they were not getting the chemical reactivity or the type of kill that they thought they should get in the field. They were blaming the product, when in reality it was the water. So again, that is something that we've tried to educate our sales force on, try to educate our customers on for the benefit, of using growers. But it affects so many things. And, from field application to livestock, drinking water, these new calf barns that have popped up all over the country. This can be a big issue when you bring calves from another area, and the new water that they're consuming can be quite problematic for them. And see, this is something that is not examined closely because there's not a lot of knowledge about water. We've worked with these new green ammonia machines trying to make different types of nitrogen. And we've actually found the water that you use to try to make these green ammonias are a big problem, a very big problem. And there's not a lot of people that have a lot of education on water. So this is a very complex subject, and we think it's something that we can help farmers with very significantly. That's part of our educational process. So again, if they have questions about water, our sales force, we've trained them the best we can, and we'll talk about anything that guys are interested in as far as how water is affecting our product particularly, but their whole operation.
Yeah. Well, in one example, when I first started here, we went out to Bob Hubbard's out in Wisconsin, and he's a beef guy, and he was showing us his RO, reverse osmosis system, because his water was so high in TDS, right. And he actually had a sample. And usually a high TDS water will react with growers.
Correct.
And we always suggest doing the water test where you take 15 parts of the water and 1 part growers, let
correct.
It sit and see if it reacts.
Right.
Well, Bob had a TDS water of over 1,100, and he did the water test, and it did not react with growers.
That's right.
Can you explain that one?
No, I can't.
I got him.
As Bob was one of the reps for us that has had to deal with this high TDS problem. And, of course, his way of solving that was going to the reverse osmosis filtration system, which, again, works very nicely, but, again, it's expensive. But Bob, when he ran into this particular well with this high TDS, and we couldn't see any reaction with the grower's product, it's still a mystery to us, basically. The fact of the matter is something like that, as long as there's no chemical interaction, the growers should work correctly. Now, how that works in an animal, I wouldn't have any knowledge about that. We'd have to talk to somebody in physiology that's got more experience with that. But see, what we try to do with high TDS water in some cases is put acid in it to tie up the TDS, which is calcium, magnesium, manganese, so that it isn't chemically reactive with the phosphorus in the growers. And guys are using things like, we discussed that in another podcast, the jar test. If you see that reaction between the 15-to-1 ratio, then add vinegar or citric acid or sulfuric. We've had guys use phosphoric acid to try to tie up those active minerals so that they don't interact with the phosphorus in the growers. And again, that is something it's basically a Band-Aid on the problem, because the minerals will keep reacting in the water till the addition of the acid is totally used up. And once that happens, then you'll start to have reactivity with the grower's product. So that's why understanding what kind of water you're working with is just absolutely paramount. The 15-to-1 is a nice start. I would say Bob could use that water as long as it doesn't interact with the growers. The growers will do its job or get into the plant accordingly, but that mineral that's there, is that causing other problems for the plant? And again, trial and error is really the only way to figure that out.
Just tells you how complex water really is.
Oh yeah, it's a very complex subject, and what we're seeing in the water world, in my opinion, I have a son-in-law that works for a massive construction outfit, and they deal with water plants and municipalities, and the things that are ending up in water today that the humans are exposed to is just, it's phenomenal. And see, this is something that's going to have to be addressed, in my opinion. The things that they're talking about with health of individuals and youth health and that, I think the water chemistry part of it's going to have to be addressed, and it's going to be a very serious issue. We've as a society have accepted that it's a right that we have because of just being in the human race. Water is a very critical thing, and we're running into serious problems with it, and we have to start addressing those. The TDS thing is just a very minor part of that, in my opinion. They're talking about PFAS being in water now, talking about different microbes that are part of the water. We had that problem in our hog operation. We had iron bacteria that was scouring little pigs. As we tried to wean pigs earlier, we struggled more with it because of the bacteria that was associated with the iron in the water. So again, I think your question is well placed. It's a complex subject, and there's a lot of things people can do to help themselves to improve, their overall operation just by manipulating their water.
Well, thanks, Jim. As usual, very informative, and we'll keep the questions coming.
Yeah. No, this is, as in my opinion, again, that we've experienced a lot of things. We talk to farmers. They give us feedback. They tell us things that are successful in their operation, and that's really our approach, is to try to tell you what our experience is. This has been a big conversion of Chris away from corporate sales and the rah-rah sales, in what I call it, and try to sell through education. We're trying to help the farmer understand things that will make his operation function better. My opinion is, if you're a farmer now, you got to be good, because society is trying to eliminate us. So the situation is, we will tell you what we know, and if it's something that's helpful to you, we have a lot of things that we can talk about. And these questions that come up in the field all the time, this is a good way to explore those types of issues. This podcast has been brought to you by Growers Mineral. Please visit growersmineral.com.